Do not enter your basement. Stay above ground. It was 10:31 when my phone buzzed. Emergency alert. Do not enter underground structures, such as basements. Stay above ground until the all clear. My husband looked up from his phone and stared at me. Did you just get a... Yeah. That's creepy, I said, glancing at the stairs. Our kid had fallen asleep for the night about an hour ago. What do you think's going on? I don't know, he replied. Could it be like a gas leak, radon or something? We'd had a radon pump in our basement since we moved here. Maybe there was some weird influx of it or something. I ran up the stairs to check on our 5-year-old daughter as Luke flicked on the TV. Grace was sleeping peacefully, her blanket wrapped around her. I made sure she was breathing, comfortable, totally fine, before heading back downstairs. When I did, Luke was glued to the TV, which said the same thing. Black screen, pixelated white letters, blocky colors jittering along the top and bottom of the screen. Emergency alert. Do not enter underground structures. Maybe we should get out of here, I said. But it's late, and Grace has school tomorrow. Yeah, so? We'll miss school. We can go to my mom's. Luke crossed his arms and stared at the TV. He then flicked to CNN and other news channels, but whatever was happening here must have been local, because it was just the same political drivel re-airing from earlier in the day. There was not a blip of the emergency alert anywhere except the local news channel. I pulled out my phone and did some Google searches. Nothing came up. So I shut off a text to Lacey, the mom of one of Grace's friends, who lived in the next development over. We'd only lived here since the school year started, so it's not like I had a whole network of people to ask. She didn't respond. I think we should go, I said, grabbing a duffel bag out of the closet. What about work? Don't you work remotely on Mondays anyway? Yeah, but... I walked over to our basement door. The chain was latched. I hurried into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out some postal tape. What are you doing? If it's radon or something, I don't want that stuff all in our house, I said, crouching along the bottom and taping the crack under the door. They'd think they'd evacuate us if that were the case. I looked up at him as I yanked another long piece of tape off the roll. Okay, so what do you think it is? He shrugged. When I'd taped all the cracks, I brought the duffel bag upstairs, filled it with a few random outfits for me and Grace, along with my laptop and a few of her favorite dolls. Then I grabbed the cooler and loaded our leftover pasta and yogurts into it. Within 10 minutes, I was ready to go out the door. I'll pack up the car. Can you grab Grace? I asked. Luke went upstairs. I walked down the driveway, weighed down with bags. It was a chilly, clear night. Stars twinkled high above me. The street was exceedingly quiet, the tall, scraggly pines of the surrounding pine barrens stretching up to the sky. I heard the echo of a dog barking somewhere. If everyone got the alert, wouldn't there be more people deciding to leave? I glanced at the house across the street. It was completely dark except for the light above the garage that flicked on when I came out of the house. I opened the back hatch and threw our stuff in. Luke came after, carrying Grace, wrapped in blankets. She blinked sleepily. I strapped her in, Luke grabbed some stuff, and then we were pulling out of the driveway, on the road to my mom's house, an hour away. She fell back asleep, I told Luke, watching her face flick into view with the light of the passing street lamps. Good. My phone buzzed. I reached for it. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates you're leaving city limits. We do not recommend evacuating. Please return home and stay above ground. What the fuck? I whispered. What? Luke asked. There's another alert. It's saying it knows we're leaving. It's tracking our GPS, and it's telling us to stay. Luke glanced at my phone. Seriously? Yeah. That's data supposed to be private, isn't it? I would think so, unless, I don't know, maybe there are some emergency protocols that allow the FBI to access it or something? We fell into an uncomfortable silence. Luke clicked on the turn signal, switched lanes. You don't want me to turn around, right? He asked quietly. I glanced down at my phone. No, I don't. The highway was empty, not a single car in sight. That made me uneasy. Surely other people would be evacuating, unless they were all actually obeying the second message. But who even trusts the government these days? I did another Google search. Nothing came up. I refreshed over and over again. Wouldn't something be on the internet by now? We were 5 miles out of town now. I should be relieved, but I wasn't. I leaned against the window. The cold glass pressed against my forehead. The pine trees flashed by, skinny and tilted, then gave way to a charred, barren patch of forest. Both sides of the highway were burnt to the ground. I'd read somewhere that some pine cones only open in extreme temperatures, like from a wildfire. Fires and regrowth were part of the cycle here, part of the ecosystem, in flux between death and rebirth like a phoenix. My phone buzzed. My heart dropped. But it wasn't an alert. It was a text from Lacey. Only 2 words. What alert? My fingers raced across the screen. Didn't you get an alert saying to stay above ground? No. Lacey didn't get an alert, I said. Luke paused. What? What if the alerts were only sent to our phones? I asked, my voice shaking. I glanced back at Grace, still peacefully asleep, head lolling softly with each bump of the car. Luke shook his head. That's crazy. No one can send messages like that, just the government or whatever. What if it's a trap? I asked, my voice shaking harder. What if the only safe place was our basement? That's just your OCD talking, he said softly, empathetically. We're doing the right thing. There's something weird in town, like a gas leak, and we got out. That's obviously the safest thing to do. I stared out at the charred pines. There were a few that hadn't burned up, standing tall and stilted in the darkness. I stared out at them, wondering why they were spared. One of them moved. What the... The car screeched to a stop. My body lurched forward, the seatbelt locked, keeping my head from hitting the dash. Sorry, that deer just darted... His voice died in his throat. We both stared at the lower legs of something illuminated in the headlights. Thin and spindly, but definitely not a deer's. They ended in twisted toes, not hooves, and extended several feet up into the darkness. Silhouetted against the starry sky, beyond the reach of our headlights, I could see something. Something tall and spindly, skeletal, crisscrossing lines of bones or sticks or something else entirely. As I stared at it, as it stared at me, a wave of dizziness washed through me. The world seemed to tilt on its axis, weight pressed down on my head, an immense pressure bearing down on me. The whack! Something hit the side of the car with incredible force. The entire car rocked on its wheels. I screamed. The whack! A mess of lines, bones, sticks outside my window, empty air between them, the stars and the pines rippling strangely behind it. Luke stomped down on the accelerator. The car shot forward. We swerved around the thing, then past the burnt section of forest and continued down the dark, twisting highway. My phone buzzed. Emergency alert. All clear. Please return home immediately. We got to my mom's house around midnight, a squat brick ranch on a residential road. I glanced warily at the pines behind her house, stretching up to the sky, before picking up Grace and carrying her inside. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for us, her fingers wrapped against the mug in her hand. The entire house smelled like that familiar mix of coffee and dust. I started for the guest bedroom and then got a better idea. The ranch had a lower level that was half underground. It had been finished into an office, but there was a couch down there. I could have Grace sleep on the couch, and we could sleep on the floor. Where are you going? Mom was standing behind me, eyebrow raised, as I undid the chain lock to the basement floor. I think we're going to sleep down there. No, you're not. It's all dusty down there. I haven't cleaned for ages. There could even be mice, and... We're sleeping down here. Those alerts were probably just a prank, she continued, or a glitch or something. Besides, you're like an hour away now. I'd only told my mom about the alerts. I didn't tell her about the thing in the woods. My mom was not a supernatural person. She'd definitely chalk it up to a trick of the light or something. Casper himself could be floating in front of her, and she'd call it a trick of the light. You're being ridiculous, she continued. You know, this reminds me of that time you taped up the door to the attic. Remember? When the exterminator had found a bat up there? You were worried there were more with rabies, and they could squeeze through really tiny places between the door and the ceiling and bite you while you were sleeping. You don't feel the bites when you're sleeping, I growled back. A lot of people have gotten rabies from bats in their houses, and they can squeeze through really tiny places. My point is, she interrupted, it's unsanitary down there. Grace was getting incredibly heavy in my arms. I glanced at Luke, who was just standing in the doorway wide-eyed, like he'd walked in on a gunfight. Then I pulled the chain lock and yanked the door open. Kate, Mom said warningly. Halfway down the stairs, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I got Grace settled on the couch, then pulled it out. Emergency alert. Your phone's GPS indicates you have stopped in, redacted, NJ. Disobeying an emergency alert is a federal offense. Please return home and stay above ground. I lifted my phone to show Luke, who was coming down behind me. His face looked ghastly pale in the white light. Mom was right behind him and craned her neck to read the alert too. Oh, that's BS, she said. It's not a federal offense, it's a state offense, and that would be an evacuation order, like for a hurricane or something. She shook her head. You know what this sounds like? One of those scammers. I got a call from someone claiming to be my grandson. It's not a scam, Luke interrupted, without elaborating. Then he worked in silence, putting the blanket over Grace, getting her comfortable. I flicked on the light and checked for mouse droppings, but I didn't see any. I'll get the rest of our stuff, he said, leaving my mom and I alone. Her expression softened as she looked down at Grace, at her perfectly cherubic little face. Do you need anything else? I don't think so. She nodded and went back upstairs. I glanced around. The office stuff was in the leftmost corner, the desk covered with papers and a single photo of my dad. He'd been gone 7 years now, and it seemed like every year more and more of his stuff got tucked away, moved downstairs, shoved into storage. I swallowed down the feeling and glanced around the rest of the room. The door next to the desk led to the unfinished storage area. On the other end of the basement was a sliding glass door that led out into the backyard. I didn't like that at all. We were technically underground where we stood, but the rightmost corner with the door was above ground. Did that mean we were still vulnerable? Those things couldn't fit through a glass door, I thought. But they couldn't fit through a normal door either, and apparently we wouldn't have been safe in our own home. I stared out the glass door, afraid I might see one of them out there. Maybe this was a bad idea, to stay here. We were an hour away, sure, but the pines were still right at our door. Not officially the Pine Barrens, but the surrounding Pinelands ecosystem, which was almost the same thing. If those things came from the Barrens, they were only in the burned areas, I reminded myself. I imagined a pine cone spiraling in midair, petals opening as fire raged around it, and skeletons made of sticks prying their way out of the thing, creeping along the ground, stretching and growing towards the sky. Were there any maps of the burned areas? I pulled up Google Maps, looking for the blackened areas, but the information would be out of date, wouldn't it? My phone buzzed. I expected another alert, but it was a text from Lacey instead. My friend Rochelle got the same alert you did, by the way, it read. Super weird. My heart dropped. Did Rochelle, whoever she was, listen to the alert? Tell her not to listen to the alert. It's a trap. Then I realized how unhinged that sounded. I didn't even know Lacey that well. I thought for a second, then typed a new message. Can you give me her number? I want to ask her about it. Pretty weird that it targeted both of us, no one else. Sure, let me ask her, was the reply. As I waited, Luke came down the stairs, carrying our stuff, computer cords and stuffies nearly falling out of his arms. "Someone else got the alert," I whispered. "One of Lacey's friends." "Really?" "Yeah, I asked for her number." A minute later, the number came in. I dialed it immediately. On the third ring, she picked up. "Hello?" "Hi, this is, Kate, Lacey's friend," I started awkwardly. "We got the emergency alert too, but we think it's a trap. There's something off about it." A pause. "But it came from the government," she replied. "How could it be a trap?" "It seems like no one else is getting it. When alerts are sent out like that, they're sent to all the phones in a certain location. It doesn't make sense." "Yeah, I don't know. It's weird." Another pause. "Well, we were just about to go to bed here, so I'd better go." "Wait, I think the basement is safe and everywhere else isn't," I said quickly. "I think someone's trying to lure people into staying above ground." "Okay, maybe," she said unconvincingly. "Look, I gotta go, sorry." A few seconds later, the call ended. "Well, shit." "She didn't believe me," I said, looking up at Luke, my lip trembling. "She and her kids and her family, they're all going to—" "You tried," he said, wrapping his arms around me. I couldn't help it. I cried as we laid a blanket on the floor, got ready to sleep next to Grace. I looked down at her perfect little face, and then Luke and I snuggled under the blankets together. "Hey, kiddo." I woke up with a start. For a second, I thought I was in my own bed, but then the roughness of the carpet, the aching in my back, brought me back to reality. My father's voice, rough and warm, lingered from the dream. I could almost feel his arms around me, the summer sunlight beating down on us as we played at the creek behind the house. I rolled over to check on Grace, and her eyes were wide open. She was staring behind me, at the sliding glass door. Slowly, she raised a hand and pointed over my shoulder. I turned around. There was something twisting and turning, contorting itself, trying to get in through the sliding glass door like a dog through a cat door. It did it silently, except for a low clicking sound, like the popping of joints. All the blood drained from my face. Dark, sinewy legs, like spider legs, twisting and turning, in the moonlight, squeezing itself, ever so slowly, through the hole it made. I now saw the shattered glass scattering the floor. I grabbed Luke and shook him. "Luke!" The thing fell still. I couldn't see eyes or a face, but I felt it in my gut. It was staring at me. Dizziness swept over me. I stumbled forward, losing my balance. It was like I was standing on the deck of a boat. The ground seemed to shift and tilt beneath me. I just wanted to lie down until the world stopped turning. "No!" I screamed internally. "You can't let that thing get Grace." I glanced around the room, looking for something that could be used as a weapon, anything. "Go in there," I said to Grace, pointing to the storage room, or at least I thought I was. Everything was tilting and moving around me. My father was standing in front of me, standing there in the basement, but his face was all wrong. His eye drooped out of his socket, like something had squeezed his skull. His grin was crooked. "Hey, kiddo," he said, in a voice that sounded off-key. Nausea filled me. I started vomiting, warm liquid down my shirt, splashing on my feet. My dad, not dad, stood tilted, like gravity had suddenly changed. One arm was too long and hung limply from its socket. "I miss you so much." "Stop," I sobbed. "Please. Come with me. We can be a family again." "Stop." "I never got to meet Grace. Wouldn't it be so wonderful for me to finally meet her?" The world tilted and shifted. I stared at my father, his left eye drooping like jelly, his crooked smile, his gaunt face, his limp arms. I opened my mouth. Hot pain shot up my shoulder. I fell to my knees instantly. I tried to cry out, to say stop again, to tell Grace to run for her life, but all that came out was a scream of pain, and another, and another. When I finally opened my eyes, the world had stopped tilting. Luke was dragging me across the floor, back from the glass door. Grace was peeking out of the storage area, terrified. I touched my shoulder, stinging with pain. My fingers came away red. It bit me. "I'm dying." "What?" My phone began to ring. Shaking all over, I reached into my pocket and pulled it out. It recognized the number. It was Rochelle. "You're right," she said breathlessly. No preamble. "What?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "My husband, he has some friends who work with cell phones and stuff, and She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. "They traced the signal. It's not coming from the government or the town hall or whatever." I chewed my lip, held my breath. "It's coming from the middle of the woods." The hospital was mostly empty, quiet, dark. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the walls were a sickly shade of sea foam green. The doctor, a tall, thin man in his 60s, didn't seem to believe my story, but he admitted me for observation anyway. My mom was staying at her friend's house with Grace, in their non-walkout basement. I didn't want to leave her. I wanted her right here with me. But the hospital was above ground, and someone needed to treat my wound before I bled to death. Luke left me for a moment to use the bathroom. I closed my eyes, not intending to sleep, but I was so tired, and the bite was now only a dull, throbbing pain. I drifted in and out of consciousness, until I heard two voices in the room. I snapped my eyes open for a moment to see the doctor and a nurse hovering over me. They were talking softly to each other, looking concerned. I quickly shut my eyes again, pretending to be asleep. I caught a snatch of their conversation. "It's just like that man," the nurse whispered. "The one that was admitted last night, John something." A pause. "I know. What do you think this is?" "I don't know, Rita. I really don't." "Do you think we should give her diazepam, preventatively?" the nurse asked. "The other one, he screamed so much." "The family'll ask questions. There's no reason for her to be on diazepam for an animal bite." "They'll ask questions when she's dead, too," the nurse snapped back. "The least we can do is make her comfortable." "Shh." Oh, shit. I didn't open my eyes, but I jumped when the nurse said dead. I now could feel both of them looking at me, their eyes boring through my closed lids. "Let's talk somewhere else," the doctor said. Hurried footsteps on tile. And then, nothing. I opened my eyes. I'm going to die? I don't know how long I lay there, wallowing in my own misery, but footsteps jolted me awake. Luke was walking back in. "How's the pain now?" "Bad." I told him what I'd overheard, my voice quavering. "That doesn't mean anything," he said, but I could hear the concern in his voice. "We're going to get out of here, and everything is going to go back to normal. The mayor or whatever will release some statement about a faulty alert system and—" "Stop!" He looked at me warily, but shut up. The two of us sat in silence. A few times Luke opened his mouth, looking like he was going to say something, but then quickly shut it again. Footsteps pattered by outside in the hallway. The tinny sounds of the TV droned on in the corner. "I'm going to call Rochelle," I told him. The line rang 3 times before she picked up. I told her everything, about the bite, about the things I saw. I was afraid of sounding crazy, but when I'd finally finished, she sounded like she was crying on the other side. "I saw my baby," she said in a low tone, barely above a whisper. I had a miscarriage at 14 weeks, and I saw this little basket with a tiny pink thing bundled up inside, and I heard her cry." Her voice broke. "I knew it wasn't real, but I still went toward it before Ravi pulled me back." "I'm so sorry," I said, the phone trembling in my hands. "Thank you. But it didn't hurt you, right? Bite you? Claw you?" "No, I don't think so." The silence stretched out between us. "So what do we do? Just run from it forever?" "I've been talking to someone who knows about this more than we do. Maybe I should come see you. What hospital are you at?" She told me she'd be there in an hour. Time skip. Rochelle was a short, thin woman with brown skin and thick framed glasses. She wore a t-shirt with some sort of video game reference on it and faded jeans. As she hurried in, she was wringing her hands, twisting them over and over. Following after her was a woman in her 50s. Her salt and pepper hair was cropped short, and her skin was deathly pale, like she'd never seen the sun. "This is Jamie," she was gesturing to the older woman. "She's a professor and specializes in this kind of stuff. I've been talking to her for the past few hours, and she wanted to see you." "This kind of stuff?" The woman abruptly sat down and leaned in towards me like I was some kind of specimen she was eager to examine. "You know what's going on here?" I asked as she stared at my shoulder in a way that made me extremely uncomfortable. "Yes, sort of. Have you ever heard of something called speculative evolution?" "No," I replied. "Okay, it's reconstructing what kinds of creatures would evolve under different circumstances. Maybe an amphibian would evolve to have wings like a bat if insects didn't hover around ponds. You see what I mean?" I guess. Okay, we also try to construct what animals might look like millions of years from now, or humans. What kind of things will evolve under the pressure of modern humanity, modern technology? There's already some of it happening. The bedbugs in New York City are hundreds of times more resistant to pesticides than the ones in Florida are. Deer are more skittish than they were 10 years ago because cars kept hitting them. Okay, I had no idea where she was going with this. "You haven't seen that image of what humans would look like if they were evolved to survive car crashes? The man has like no neck and lots of fat to cushion the impact, right?" "No." "Okay," she shook her head. "The point is, some people in this field believe that at some point, creatures would evolve abilities that mimic technology, like birds that look like drones, or bats that can sense electromagnetic fields. Who's to say this thing that you and Rochelle have described hasn't evolved the ability to send out radio signals, hack our entire mobile system?" "That's ridiculous. So what? This thing is like texting? In English?" "No, nothing like that. States, local governments, they often have pre-programmed emergency messages, like a protocol for hurricanes, earthquakes, nuclear threats, etc. This thing, it just hacked a signal to send a particular protocol. Same thing with Rochelle," she said, looking sympathetically at her. "We're all sending little electromagnetic signals in our brains, all the time. Neural impulses. Sharks, 400 million-year-old living fossils, can detect them. These things, they can hack them." "So when I saw my dad," I glanced at Luke, "that thing was hacking my brain signals?" Jamie nodded. "It's a little more complicated than that. I believe this thing sends out a chemical in the air, too, at close range, that messes with some neurotransmitters. But essentially, yes." "Okay, but why is the basement safe then? Because it's too big to get down there?" "I'm glad you asked," Jamie replied with a big, victorious smile on her face, like she was just about to tell us the secret to the universe. "They chose that emergency protocol with the basement because their abilities don't work if you're underground, just how your phone reception goes out when you're underground." A heavy silence filled the room. Luke and I looked at each other. For one, this sounded pretty out there, conspiracy theory level, more unbelievable than Roswell. On the other hand, nothing I'd experienced in the past 24 hours made sense. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "This isn't the first time this has happened," she replied, her face grim. "Almost 10 years ago, the same thing happened, out by Woodland, on the border of Wharton State Forest. I studied it then, too, but there weren't as many of them." "Okay, but the text didn't get sent to everyone, only us and Rochelle, so far that we know of." "Right, so these things, I call them stickmen, by the way, they only target people with overactive imaginations, people who send out really clear, strong brain signals. It's easier for them to find you, and it's easier for them to hack your brain. They're not actually producing the image you see of your deceased loved ones or whatever. They're just knocking it loose from your memory, from something you've imagined.
If you've imagined your kid dying 1,000 times because you have anxiety or OCD, that makes it all the easier for them to use it against you and lure you in. And of course, there's more for them to eat. More for them to eat. Yeah, they eat brains. I might have mentioned that, didn't I? More awkward, heavy, suffocating silence. Kate said she heard the doctor saying she's going to die, he said in a soft voice. Is that true? Jamie glanced at me, but stayed silent. Rochelle jumped in, her voice full of heartache. Jamie told me once it bites you, it's linked to you, and it will follow you, and end you. It'll show you your worst nightmares first, show you everything you fear, but when it starts showing you yourself in these waking nightmares, that usually means you only have a day left. I swallowed a wave of nausea. Then I started getting out of the hospital bed. I needed to get out of here, away from Jamie's stare, Luke's concern. Just a moment of silence. Maybe I'd get a Coke from the vending machine, not even a diet one. I hadn't had a full sugar one in ages. I tried to keep the memory of my dad before me in my mom's basement. I had imagined him saying those exact words when I was at my lowest point years ago, when a flicker of suicide showed itself in an ocean of postpartum depression. And that fucker, the stick man or whatever, had used it against me. Another wave of nausea. I pushed towards the door. Wait, Rochelle said, standing up,
reaching for my arm. I'll be right back, I snapped. I made my way down the empty hospital hallway. Beeping machines, echoey footsteps in the distance. Tears pricked my eyes. I kept going, making a left, then a right, following the signs for the vending machines. My feet shuffled along the ground, taking me there slowly, ever so slowly. Kate, stop! I turned to see Luke coming after me. He stopped 6 feet away, trying to give me space. I just need a minute, I replied, my voice shaky. No, it's not that. Your mom just texted me, and we have to go. Grace. His voice broke. My heart broke with it. What? What happened? She fell, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She's not conscious. They're rushing her to the hospital. To the hospital? You mean here? They're taking her here? I asked frantically. They're taking her to the hospital, he repeated. Something twinged inside me. That doesn't make sense. That's not an answer. I looked down. No. On the floor, something black, slick and wet on the green linoleum floor. A tendril, like a long umbilical cord, attached to Luke's foot and leading down the hallway. I felt dizzy. The world started to tilt. Kate! I turned around to see Luke behind me, frozen, eyes wide. I looked back. Other Luke was no longer standing there. It was me. I was staring at my own face. I wish I could say it looked different, one eye popping out, skin all blistered and pink, but it wasn't. It looked exactly like me, like looking in a mirror. I looked down. Other me was holding a pillow. She held my gaze for a second, then looked down at the floor. I followed her gaze. Grace was lying at my feet, eyes closed, hands resting neatly under her head, fast asleep. No. I knew this intrusive thought. I knew how it ended. It's not real. It's not real. I turned and ran back down the hallway, reaching for Luke's hand, rustling behind me. I couldn't look back. I couldn't. Luke pulled me into the room, and I followed, breathless. We have to get underground. It's here. Rochelle and Jamie looked at me. Then they looked at the floor. For a second, I thought I was going to see my worst nightmare, but instead, I looked down to see blood dripping off my arm, seeping through my shirt,
traveling in wet, soaky rivulets, dripping to the floor. Drip, drip, drip. Jamie shot up and walked over to me. Gently, she pushed back the cloth of my shirt, exposing the wound on my shoulder. Necrotic tissue, she whispered. She shook her head sadly. It's begun.
I can't die. I can't. My shoulder pulsed with pain. I continued running down the hall towards the big red exit sign. The hospital hadn't released me. Stop, Luke begged, catching up with me, but I forced myself to run faster, despite the pain. I wasn't going to just sit in the hospital room and wait to die. Obviously, from what the doctor said, that's what happened to the last one. I was going to get underground. Maybe I would have to stay there forever, or until they found a way to kill these things. I would not leave Grace without a mother. I wanted more than anything to go to her, hug her, tell her I loved her, but maybe that thing could follow me, even into a basement. I didn't think so, but I couldn't risk it. The best thing I could do was get underground. Buy time. Grace was as safe as she could be, with my mom, underground. I ran towards the exit. The red sign glowed brightly in the darkness of the hallway. One of the lights flickered overhead. My bare feet slapped against the floor. The floor felt sharp. I kept running, but it didn't seem like I was getting any closer to the exit sign. What the? I glanced back. Luke wasn't following me anymore, nor Rochelle or Jamie. The hallway extended behind me, stretching back into the darkness infinitely. I kept running. The exit door was open now, still so far away. A stiff breeze blew in, ruffling through my hair. It smelled of pine and wood and decay. Keep running. The ground was so rough under my feet. The air was so cold. The lights above me flickered wildly. The door didn't get any closer, no matter how fast I sprinted. A few leaves swirled by outside in the darkness. Keep running. The lights above me flickered out. And then I wasn't in the hospital anymore. I was in the middle of the woods. Pine trees stretched up into the darkness. The sand, littered with sharp sticks and rocks, bit into the bare soles of my feet. Silence rang in my ears, except for a light fluttering sound somewhere in the darkness. No. It tricked me. I wheeled around. I didn't see any lights, any break in the trees. How deep in the barrens am I? How long have I been running? The darkness closed in, suffocating me. I felt my pockets. No phone. No way to call for help. No way to know where I am. I sucked in a breath, ready to scream into the darkness. But that would draw the stickmen to me, wouldn't it? Or did it not matter? Did they already know where I was? I looked up at the stars, at the slices of sky poking through the pines. I tried to identify them. Is that Cassiopeia? But I didn't know anything about how to tell directions from the stars. Besides, the pines blocked out most of the sky anyway. No, wait. That's not the way to do this. I ran in here. My legs didn't feel that sore. Even though it must have distorted time, I'd only felt like I was running for a minute. If I'd run 10 miles into the barrens, I'd know. I just needed to figure out what direction I came from. I wheeled around, trying to look for footprints, flattened vegetation, any sign of where I'd come from. But it was pitch dark out, and I didn't have any source of light. There was moonlight, enough to see so that I didn't smack into a tree, but not enough to look for footprints in the sand. I stared at the trees, but the branches were up too high and too thin to support my weight. I couldn't climb them to get a better vantage point. I ransacked my pockets again. Nothing. So I started off in a random direction. Sticks stabbed at my feet. Pebbles rolled underneath my toes. I kept walking forward, trying to keep a straight line. The Pine Barrens is 1,000,000 acres, but an acre wasn't that many square miles. I remembered that from somewhere. I tried to focus on doing the math.
If I was in the center and walked in a random direction, how long would it take me to get to the edge? 5 hours? 10? More than that? And of course I'd heard the stories. Even without the stickmen, the pine barrens were deadly enough. Carnivorous plants, rattlesnakes, and a way of turning people around. It was easy to get lost in the infinite pines. I thought of Grace, Luke telling her I was gone, her crying, melting down. She needed me. Maybe years ago, at that low point in my life right after Grace was born, I wouldn't have been quite so panicked at the thought of dying. But I was panicking now. I picked up the pace. Sticks stabbed at my feet harder. I tried to keep a straight line, but it was so hard in the dark, and for all I knew, I was just walking deeper and deeper into the barrens. Then I saw it. A clearing. My heart soared. That must be where I came from. It was one of the burned areas. The fire had hollowed out a large clearing. It was lit in silver tones by the nearly full moon, no longer obscured. Some pines still stood, completely bare of needles, skeletal and black. Ash blackened the pale sand beneath, the color of bone. A few pine saplings poked through the destruction, only inches tall. It was deathly silent. I'm never going to get out of here. I looked up at the blackened pines stretching up to the sky like fingers. Snap. I wheeled around. Someone was standing at the edge of the trees, painted in all tones of gray from the moonlight, barely visible among the trees. I took off into a run, but in my panic, I tripped. It felt like it was in slow motion. The sandy, ashy ground rose up to meet me. Pain shot up my arms. My shoulders screamed in pain. Sticks scraped my cheek. Snap, snap, snap. I scrambled up to see myself standing there, arms hanging limply at my sides, hair grazing my shoulders. "Let me go!" I screamed. My voice echoed and died into the forest. She stepped closer. I could hear, too, a wet smacking sound. There was another slimy black appendage attached to her feet, controlling her like a puppet. She canted her head at me, and her lips split into an unnatural grin. I turned and tried to run again. An intense wave of dizziness hit me. The ground tilted. Heaviness pressed down on my head. My stomach lurched, and I was vomiting, stumbling, tripping in my own puddle of vomit. "Stop!" I croaked. I was lying on my back, warm, wet vomit seeping through the back of my shirt. Twisted black appendages were filling up the corners of my vision, melting with the twisted black pines stretching up to the sky. The sky above me looked like shooting stars moving across the sky with how dizzy I was. The sky was replaced with my own face. Her face. Her hair hung onto my face, sticking to the sweat and the vomit. Her lips curled in a smile. And then her mouth began to open, wider, wider, wider. Rows of sharp teeth, like a lamprey's, descending into the darkness of her throat. I tried to push it off, but my hands met slime. I was pinned by the creature, one of the stickmen. It was only her disembodied head hovering over me, attached to a tangled black mess of creature. "They eat brains," Jamie's voice echoed, as the teeth loomed closer, so close I couldn't see any of the barrens anymore. "Grace, what's she going to do without me? She'll never recover. Her entire life will be ruined. I can't. I'm so sorry." And then I realized the stickmen were attracted to brain signals. What if I'd done something I'd never done before? What if I just stopped thinking? I closed my eyes, ignored the warm, rotting breath on my face, ignored the slime seeping through my shirt, ignored thoughts of Grace. I used every last bit of my willpower to stop thinking. Nothing. A void. Non-existence. A clicking sound came from above me. The creature began to shift its weight. I continued thinking about nothing. Absolutely nothing. The creature pulled itself off me. When I opened an eye, it no longer wore my head. It was twisting and turning, making clicking sounds, lifting some of its appendages in the air, as if confused, as if it thought I'd escaped, and it was trying to sense me out again. I lay there in the dark, burnt forest, thinking of nothing for seconds, minutes, hours. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, pushing away thoughts of Grace, of my future, of hers, pushing it all out and being empty. When the sun began to rise, I pulled myself up. The burnt forest was bathed in pink hues of dawn. My skin was covered in vomit and black slime. My shoulder still throbbed with pain, and there was no sign of the stickmen. It took me another few hours, but in the daylight, I was able to find my way back. After walking around in circles for a while, I caught a glimpse of a road through the trees. I had apparently fled the hospital and run half a mile into the pine barrens across the street. Luke and hospital staff were looking for me all night. I was reunited with Grace, and it was the happiest day of my life. I think the stickman is still linked to me. We've been spending our nights in the basement where we've been totally safe. Rochelle, Jamie, and I have been working together to figure out how to kill it for good. Some guy online from the incident 10 years ago claims drowning them works. But for now, I am content to be home and be safe. Even if it isn't forever, and a million bad things are waiting to happen.